I'm Michael Long. I'm the Associate Professor of Religion and Peace and Conflict Studies at Elizabethtown College. I teach classes on the Civil Rights Movement. I teach a seminar on Martin Luther King Jr. And Robinson comes into play there because he and King worked together. They were really heroes to each other. Martin Luther King adored Jackie Robinson, and Jackie Robinson admired King. And the two worked together in the Birmingham campaign and the Albany campaign. Robinson took his children to the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom on August 28, 1963. He called it the greatest day in his life. So there's a lot to teach about Jackie Robinson in my classes on civil rights. In fact, I think that Robinson is one of the most significant African Americans in U.S. history. And King was inspired by Robinson. And when Robinson shattered that racial barrier in 1947, he inspired so many African Americans to straighten their backs and to fight for their rights and to push into places where they had never been allowed to go before. And so I consider him the front runner of Martin Luther King Jr. And indeed, King stood on the shoulders of Jackie Robinson and said as much. Jackie Robinson is known primarily for being the young man in 1947 who sacrificed his life to integrate what he called a lily white sport. But I think we do him a grave injustice if we freeze him in 1947. We freeze him there, I believe, because he's pretty non-threatening. He doesn't fight back. Branch Rickey, the general manager of the Dodgers, had asked him to turn the other cheek, and that's what Robinson did in 1947. That's pretty non-threatening to folks like me in white America. Robinson becomes more threatening after he leaves baseball, and he becomes an American prophet. He's not only the American icon on the baseball diamond, but he becomes, in many ways, an angry black man who fights to the day of his death for first-class citizenship for all Americans. And he does that in politics, he does that in business, he does that in sports. 9 days before he died, he threw out the ceremonial pitch at the World Series, and he refused to do that, to accept that invitation, until Bowie Kuhn, who was the head of baseball at the time, agreed that he would help engineer the hiring of African-American managers. Robinson, 9 days before he dies, throws out the ceremonial pitch, but in addition to doing that, he makes a statement, and the statement is this: I'll be much prouder when I can look down third baseline and see a black face managing baseball. He didn't live to see that. Frank Robinson, no relation, became the first African-American manager later. But he is the legacy, Frank Robinson is the legacy of Jackie Robinson, and I think all of us who enjoy integration and who celebrate diversity are really the legacy of Jackie Robinson.